The bridge of the Crimson Vengeance reeked of burnt circuits and desperation. Commander Vexthera's 4 eyes tracked the damage reports scrolling across her tactical display. Each line a death sentence written in cold, clinical numbers. Hull integrity at 12%. Life support failing on 7 decks. Quantum drive core cracked beyond repair. The once proud flagship of the Krillian Empire's 3rd Fleet now limped through the void like a wounded beast, leaving a trail of plasma, fire, and shattered dreams. Status report. Vexthera barked, her voice cutting through the chaos of sparking consoles and emergency klaxons. The bridge crew moved with the mechanical precision of soldiers who knew they were already dead, but refused to admit it. Lieutenant? Korax, her tactical officer, stumbled toward her command chair, his uniform torn and blood-stained. Commander, we've lost contact with the lower decks. Engineering reports cascade failures in the primary power grid, and the medical bay... ... He swallowed hard. We've lost another 100 crew members in the last hour, the weight of 3,000. Lives pressed down on Vexthera's shoulders like a collapsing star. 3 weeks ago, they'd been hunting glory in the Outer Rim, chasing rumors of Void Hunter activity. Now they were the hunted, barely alive and abandoned by their own empire. Think. About it when was the last time you felt truly abandoned? That moment when everyone you trusted turned their backs on you? That's exactly what Vexthera faced, but with the stakes cranked up to galactic proportions. Communications, get me Admiral Krekstar at Imperial Command, she ordered, though her hearts already knew what the response would be. The cum officer's mandibles clicked nervously. Commander, we've already tried 17 times. The Admiral's response remains the same. We're too damaged to risk bringing near Imperial space. THEYVE, they've written us off. Vexthera's claws dug into the armrests of her command chair. 27 years of faithful service to the Empire. 27 years of bleeding for the crown, of watching friends die in the name of Krillian expansion. And this was their reward? A slow death in the cold depths of space deemed too broken to save. What about the shipyards? She demanded, though she already knew the answer. Surely someone in the Empire can. All shipyards have refused us. Korax interrupted, his voice trembling with barely contained panic. The Empire's finest engineers say, we're beyond repair. They claim our damage is too extensive, too expensive to fix. We have 18 hours of life support remaining. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady drip of coolant from damaged pipes and the labored breathing of dying crew members. In 18 hours, 3,000 souls would become another statistic, another casualty in the endless war for galactic dominance. Vexthera closed her 4 eyes and remembered her first command. She'd been so young, so eager to prove herself. Worthy of the Krillian military tradition, her father had served the Empire for 40 years. Her grandfather had died fighting the Andromedon Collective. The weight of legacy had always driven her forward. Now it felt like chains dragging her into the abyss. Here's what's fascinating about desperation. It makes you consider options you'd never think of otherwise. When you're drowning, you don't care if the life preserver comes from your worst enemy. That's when the impossible happened. A soft chime echoed through the bridge, indicating an incoming transmission. But this wasn't from the Empire. This wasn't from any of the established shipyards or repair facilities that had already condemned them to death. The source identifier made every crew member freeze in disbelief. Transmission origin, human repair. Station Liberty's Edge, the cum officer announced, his voice barely above a whisper. They're requesting permission to assist. The message that appeared on the main screen was simple, almost laughably so. We can fix anything. No exceptions. No questions asked. Transmitting coordinates now. Vexthera stared at the words, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Humans. The newest species in the galactic community, barely 50 years out of their home system, were offering to repair a ship that the Empire's best engineers had declared hopeless. Chief Engineer Thokmar, a veteran of 100 battles and survivor of the Great Siege of Vorth Prime, looked absolutely horrified. Commander, this is madness. Humans are primitives. They still use chemical rockets for some of their transports. They don't even understand quantum field theory properly. This is suicide. The irony wasn't lost on Vexthera. Here they were, the proud representatives of a civilization that had mastered faster-than-light travel, when humans were still discovering agriculture, and now they were considering begging those same primitives for help. "What exactly are our alternatives, Thokamar?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of command and the bitter taste of reality. "We can die here with our pride intact, or we can swallow that pride and maybe, just maybe, save 3,000 lives." The old engineer's mandibles clicked. In frustration, the commander, "Their technology is so crude. They use metal welding instead of quantum bonding. They still rely on mechanical systems instead of pure energy manipulation. How could they possibly understand our systems?" Vexthera stood up, her massive form casting shadows across the damaged bridge. His old friend, understanding and fixing are two different things. Maybe what we need isn't someone who understands our technology perfectly. Maybe we need someone desperate enough to try anything. The tactical display showed their position deep in neutral space, far from any Imperial patrol routes. If they were going to die, it would be alone, forgotten, with no witness to their final moments except the cold stars. "Set course for the human station," she commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge's terror like a blade. "At least we'll die trying." The Crimson Vengeance limped toward the coordinates. Something extraordinary began to happen. The human repair station, which had appeared as little more than a collection of metal platforms and docking bays, began to transform. Automated systems extended docking arms that shouldn't have been able to accommodate a ship 3 times their size, yet somehow, impossibly, they fit perfectly, and that's when Vexthera realized something that would change everything. Sometimes the greatest solutions come from the most unexpected sources. Want to discover how small actions can create massive changes over time? Check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding. You'll be amazed at what happens when simple principles are applied consistently. The airlock hissed open with a sound that made every Krillian warrior on the bridge wince. What? Emerged wasn't the sleek, sterile team of engineers they'd expected from their own empire's shipyards. Instead, Chief Engineer Jake Thompson floated through wearing coveralls so stained with grease and alien fluids that they looked like a Jackson Pollock painting created by a madman. Behind him came his team of 12 humans, each one carrying what looked like toolkits assembled from a garage sale. Compared to the precision-engineered equipment of Krillian technology, these humans might as well have been carrying stone hammers and wooden clubs. The alien crew watched with a mixture of disgust and desperate hope, like watching a witch doctor approach your deathbed when all the real doctors have given up. Jake's eyes swept across the bridge, taking in the sparking consoles, the acrid smoke, and the general atmosphere of impending doom. His weathered face, lined with decades of solving impossible problems, showed no fear, no hesitation. Instead, he whistled low and long, the sound somehow managing to cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "Holy hell," he muttered, running his calloused hands along the massive breach in the hull, where twisted metal jutted out like broken bones. "Your quantum core is cracked, your plasma conduits are fried, and your gravity generators are held together with prayer and sheer stubbornness. How are you even alive?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Here was this human, this primitive Bikrillian, standards asking the question that had been haunting Vexthera for 3 weeks. How were they alive? By all laws of physics and engineering, they should have been dead the moment the Void Hunter's first salvo hit their ship. "We have 16 hours, Vexthera stated coldly, her massive form towering over the human engineer, like a mountain over a pebble. Her 4 eyes burned with the intensity of dying stars. But beneath that fury lay something else, a desperate hope that she'd never admit to feeling. "Can you repair us or not?" Now here's where most people would have run screaming. Faced with technology centuries beyond their understanding, dealing with damage that the galaxy's best engineers had declared impossible to fix, any sane person would have made polite excuses and backed away slowly. But Jake Thompson wasn't most people. His weathered face broke into a grin that seemed absolutely insane given the circumstances. Was the kind of smile you'd see on a person who'd just been told they had to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops and somehow thought it sounded like fun. "Lady, we fixed ships that were nothing but scrap metal and good intentions," said his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who'd spent his entire life making the impossible routine. "I once patched a Andromedon cruiser back together, using nothing but duct tape, prayer, and the metal from a destroyed supply depot. But I need to know what did this to you." When Vexthara explained the Void Hunters' devastating attack, how their perfect killing machines had torn through the Crimson Vengeance like it was made of paper, Jake's expression grew serious. Not scared, not overwhelmed, but serious in the way a surgeon gets serious when they realize they're about to attempt something that's never been done before. "So you need to be ready for another fight," he said, nodding slowly. "Got it. These Void Hunters sound like they specialize in precision strikes against known vulnerabilities. We're going to have to get creative." Then he turned to his team and started barking orders that would have made a drill sergeant proud. "Tommy, get the fusion welders and start cutting away the damaged sections in engineering. Sarah, fire up. The fabrication units were going to need new plasma relays, and I want them built to human specifications, not Krillian. Mike, start mapping their power grid. I want to know every weak point and failure cascade in their system." What followed was the most beautiful chaos Vexthara had ever witnessed. The humans swarmed through her ship like ants with a purpose. But these weren't the methodical, by-the-book procedures she'd expected. These people worked with an energy that seemed to defy physics itself. They cut away damaged sections with the precision of surgeons, welded new components with the artistry of sculptors, somehow made alien technology work in ways its creators never imagined. But here's what really blew her mind: they were having fun. Tommy, a stocky engineer with arms like tree trunks, was actually singing while he welded a new support beam into place, not humming quietly to himself, but full-throated singing that echoed through the corridors. Sarah, meanwhile, was cracking jokes about alien spaghetti as she untangled a mess of plasma conduits that would have taken Krillian engineers weeks to sort out. "Is this normal?" Chief Engineer Thokomar asked, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and fascination as he watched a human engineer literally dance while repairing a gravity generator. "Define normal," Jake replied, not looking up from where he was elbowed deep in the quantum core assembly. "If you mean efficient, then yes. If you mean according to standard procedures, then hell no. The thing is, when you're used to everything being done by the book, watching someone throw the book away and still get results is either terrifying or inspiring." For the Krillian crew, it was both. Jake pulled his head out of the quantum core, his hair now standing at odd angles and his face streaked with some kind of luminescent fluid. "You know what your problem is?" he asked Vexthara. "Your engineers built this ship to work perfectly under perfect conditions, but space combat isn't perfect. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises." He gestured toward where Sarah was installing what looked like a completely jury-rigged power coupling. "So we're rebuilding your ship to love surprises. When your primary systems fail, our backups kick in. When your enemies target your weak points, they'll find redundancies they never expected. But the real magic wasn't in the technology. It was in the attitude. These humans treated the dying ship like a patient they refused to lose. They didn't see impossible damage. They saw an interesting challenge. They didn't see alien technology they couldn't understand. They saw puzzles waiting to be solved." Commander Thokomar whispered, watching a human engineer somehow get a damaged plasma conduit to work by hitting it with what appeared to be a regular hammer. "I think we may have underestimated these humans." As the hours ticked by, something extraordinary began to happen. The ship wasn't just being repaired, it was being transformed. And Vexthara began to realize that maybe, just maybe, being underestimated was humanity's greatest weapon. Ready? To see how small improvements compound into massive advantages? Our next video on the power of compounding will show you exactly how tiny changes create extraordinary results over time. The sound that emerged from Chief Engineer Korvik's throat could only be described as the wail of a dying priest watching his temple being demolished by barbarians. His four eyes bulged with horror as he watched the humans work. Each modification to their sacred technology feeling like a personal violation of everything he'd been taught about proper engineering. They're butchering our ship, he reported. To Vexthera, his voice cracking with the strain of witnessing what he considered technological sacrilege. Commander, they're using primitive Earth materials, actual steel alloys, mixed with our quantum-stabilized tritanium. They're connecting systems that were never meant to work together. They're completely ignoring every single one of our engineering protocols. Korvik's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sure sign of extreme agitation among his species. They've replaced our precision-manufactured plasma conduits with something they literally welded together from spare parts. They're using what they call duct tape to seal quantum containment fields. And their leader just installed what appears to be a primitive combustion engine as a backup for our antimatter drive. But here's the thing about watching someone break. All the rules, sometimes they show you that the rules were the problem all along. The modifications worked. Not only did they work, they exceeded every expectation that Krillian engineering had ever set. The humans had somehow increased the ship's shield capacity by 40%, while simultaneously reducing power consumption by 23%. They'd replaced the rigid plasma conduits that had been the pride of Krillian technology with flexible human-designed alternatives that could reroute power instantly during combat, preventing the cascade failures that had nearly destroyed them. About the last time someone showed you a completely different way to solve a problem you'd been struggling with for years, that moment when you realized that your sophisticated approach was actually making things harder, not easier. That's exactly what was happening to the crew of the Crimson Vengeance. Look at this, Korvik whispered, pointing to a display showing. The ship's new power distribution network? They've created 17 different pathways for each major system. When one fails, the others automatically compensate. It's like they've given our ship a healing factor. The more the Krillian crew watched, the more their horror transformed into something else. Entirely grudging respect mixed with complete bewilderment. These humans weren't just fixing their ship. They were reimagining what their ship could be. Found Vexthara on the bridge 12 hours later, staring at displays showing system efficiency ratings that appeared to defy the fundamental laws of physics. Her 4 eyes tracked numbers that climbed steadily upward, each percentage point representing capabilities that her ship had never possessed, even when it was fresh from the Imperial shipyards. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her voice tight with confusion and growing excitement. "Our shield generators are operating at 140% of maximum rated capacity. Our weapon systems are showing a 60% improvement in charging speed. And according to these readings, our engines are somehow more efficient than they were when the ship was brand new." Jake approached her command chair, his hands still dirty from crawling through maintenance shafts, and his coveralls now decorated with the distinctive blue glow of Krillian quantum lubricants. He looked like he'd been wrestling with the ship's mechanical systems and winning. "Your people build perfect machines for perfect conditions," he explained, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably seen more alien technology than most galactic engineers. "Every component is precisely calibrated, every system is optimized for ideal performance, and everything works beautifully until it doesn't." He gestured toward the tactical display, where the ship's new hybrid systems were illustrated in a complex web of interconnected backups and redundancies. But space combat isn't perfect. It's ugly, chaotic, and full of surprises that you're perfect systems can't handle. So we build ugly, chaotic machines that love surprises. Jake pulled up a schematic of the ship's new hybrid systems, and Vexthera felt her breath catch. Where once there had been elegant, streamlined designs, now there was something that looked like organized chaos systems layered upon systems. Backups for backups. Connections that seemed to defy logic, but somehow created something greater than the sum of their parts. "When your quantum core gets damaged, our backups kick in automatically," Jake continued, highlighting different sections of the display. "When your weapons overload, our heat sinks compensate and keep you firing. When your shields fail, our armor plating takes over. And when that fails, our emergency protocols activate. It's not elegant, but it's nearly indestructible." But here's what really made the difference. The humans hadn't just added backup systems. They'd created a ship that could adapt on the fly, learning from each attack and becoming stronger in response. It was like comparing a beautiful but fragile porcelain vase to a piece of Damascus steel. Both were impressive, but only one could survive a real fight. "You're making us into something we're not," Vextera protested, though even she could hear that her voice lacked conviction. Deep down, she was beginning to understand that what the humans were doing wasn't destroying her ship, it was revealing what it could have been all along. "We're making you into something that survives," Jake corrected, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too many good ships die, because they were too perfect for an imperfect universe. And right now, that's what matters. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of systems operating at peak efficiency. But this wasn't the sterile perfection of Krillian engineering. This was something alive, something that breathed, and adapted, and refused to quit. Vexthera looked around at her crew, seeing wonder in their eyes where there had been despair just hours before. "What have you done to us?" she asked quietly. Jake's weathered face broke into that same impossible grin. "We've given you something your empire never could, the ability to be imperfect and still win." As the final modifications were completed, one question burned in everyone's mind: would these impossible improvements actually work when put to the ultimate test? Because in the depths of space, the Void Hunters were already tracking their signature, preparing for a rematch that would determine whether human ingenuity could truly triumph over perfect alien engineering. Want to discover how? Small, consistent improvements create massive transformations over time. Check out our next video on the power of compounding. You'll see exactly how these principles apply to every area of your life. The silence on the bridge was deafening. For 3 days, the Crimson Vengeance had been operating with its new hybrid. Systems and everything seemed almost too good to be true. The crew moved with renewed purpose. The ship hummed with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, and Jake's modifications had turned their dying vessel into something that defied every law of galactic engineering. That's when the proximity. Alarms began screaming. "Contact," Lieutenant Korax shouted, his voice cracking with terror and recognition. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. "Commander, it's the Void Hunters." The enemy vessels emerged from the swirling chaos of hyperspace like nightmares given form. Sleek black ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Their hulls decorated with the distinctive energy patterns that had haunted Vexthera's dreams for weeks. These weren't just warships, they were perfect killing machines, designed by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The Void Hunters had been tracking them. Of course they had. These creatures didn't leave loose ends, didn't allow survivors to escape and tell tales of their defeats. They'd followed the Crimson Vengeance across half the galaxy, waiting for the perfect moment to finish what they'd started. Vexthera's crew tensed, every muscle in their bodies remembering the last devastating encounter with these monsters. The screams of dying comrades, the sight of whole sections being vaporized by weapons that struck with surgical precision, the helpless feeling of watching their perfect Krillian technology crumble under the onslaught of something even more perfect. But something was different this time. Vexthera felt it in her bones, a confidence that hadn't been there before. Her ship wasn't the same vessel that had limped away from that first battle. Thanks to the humans, it was something new, something unprecedented. "All hands, battle stations," she commanded, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. "Let's see what these humans have really built." The lead Void Hunter ship powered up its weapons, that familiar crimson glow building to the intensity that had once spelled doom for the Crimson Vengeance. But this time, Vexthera didn't flinch. This time she was ready, the enemy's opening. Salvo came like the fist of an angry god. Concentrated plasma bursts that should have punched through their hull like bullets through paper. Quantum disruptors designed to tear apart the molecular bonds of any known material. Energy weapons that operated on principles so advanced that most species couldn't even detect them, let alone defend against them. The attack should have vaporized the Crimson Vengeance instantly. Instead, something miraculous happened. The ship's hybrid shields absorbed the impact, but not in the way traditional shields worked. Jake's human-designed dispersal system spread the energy across the hull like water flowing over a curved surface, redirecting the devastating force into harmless patterns that actually seemed to strengthen their defensive grid. "What in the seven hells?" Korax breathed, staring at his displays in disbelief. "Commander, our shields are actually stronger after that hit." But the Void Hunters weren't finished. Their precision strikes came next, targeted attacks designed to hit the critical systems that every ship in the galaxy depended on. They went for the quantum core, the main power coupling, the primary life support systems. These were the killing blows that had worked against every enemy they'd ever faced. They found flexible human redundancies that rerouted power instantly. When the Void Hunters struck their quantum core, backup systems kicked in so smoothly that the ship never lost power. When they targeted their weapons array, auxiliary systems came online that the enemy didn't even know existed. When they tried to cripple their engines, emergency propulsion activated that somehow made them faster than before. The enemy commander's transmission crackled through the comm system, his voice filled with fury and disbelief. Impossible. Your ship was destroyed. We saw it burning. We recorded your death signatures. That's when Jake's voice came over the comm from engineering.com, and confident, and filled with the kind of humor that only comes from someone who's just pulled off the impossible. Yeah, well, we got better. Ever watch someone try to use the same strategy that worked before, only to discover that their opponent had completely changed the rules of the game? That's exactly what was happening to the supposedly invincible Void Hunters. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Crimson Vengeance fought with a brutal adaptability that confused and terrified the Void Hunters. Every attack they made was absorbed, redirected, or turned into an advantage. Every tactic they employed was countered by systems that seemed to learn and evolve in real time. When their weapons were damaged, human-designed backups activated instantly. When their engines were hit, emergency systems kicked in that actually improved their maneuverability. When their shields failed, armor plating took over that was somehow stronger than the original defenses. But here's what really broke the Void Hunters. Perfect strategy. The ship seemed to grow stronger with each attack. Every hit taught the hybrid systems something new. Every damage pattern was analyzed and compensated for. The Crimson Vengeance was learning from the fight, becoming more dangerous with each passing moment. This is impossible, the Void Hunter commander screamed. We are perfection. We are the ultimate expression of warfare. Cannot defeat us with your primitive modifications. That's your problem right there, Vextera replied, her voice carrying a confidence that surprised even her. You think perfection means never failing? We learned that perfection means never staying down. The turning point came when the Void Hunters realized their perfect killing machines were being outfought by what they considered inferior technology. Their sleek black ships, designed for quick, decisive victories, weren't equipped for prolonged combat against an enemy that refused to die. As the minutes turned to an hour, something unprecedented happened. The perfect killing machines of the Void Hunters began to retreat. Their flawless tactics, honed over centuries of galactic domination, were useless against humanity's chaotic ingenuity. Commander Korax reported, his voice filled with wonder. They're running. The Void Hunters are actually retreating. Vextera watched their enemy disappear into hyperspace, leaving behind only the debris of their damaged ships and the echo of their disbelief. The Crimson Vengeance had done more than survive, it had won. But as the cheers of victory echoed through the ship, one question remained. What would happen when word of this impossible victory spread throughout the galaxy? Because in the depths of space, other species were already receiving the battle recordings, and what they saw would change everything. Ready to see how consistent small improvements create massive advantages over time? Our next video on the power of compounding will show you exactly how these principles transform every aspect of your life starting today. The news traveled faster than light itself, is carried by quantum communicators, hyperspace beacons, and the oldest form of galactic communication, sheer disbelief. The ship that couldn't be repaired had not only survived, but thrived, defeating enemies that had terrorized the stars for centuries. The Crimson Vengeance hadn't just won a battle. It had shattered the fundamental assumptions about what was possible in galactic warfare. Within days, impossible victory was being analyzed in war rooms across 1,000 worlds. Military strategists who had spent lifetimes studying Void Hunter tactics stared at battle recordings that defied everything they thought they knew about combat. The humans, these relative newcomers to galactic civilization, had accomplished what entire armadas of advanced species had failed to do. But here's what really sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It wasn't a fluke. Within weeks, vessels from every major species were arriving at human repair stations, not just the desperate and dying ships, but the pride of galactic fleets, Andromedon cruisers that had patrolled the Outer Rim for centuries, Spherian destroyers with reputations for invincibility. Even the legendary Titan-class battleships of the Celestial Empire vessels so advanced they were considered works of art began appearing at human paradox. Jake stood in the expanded Liberty's Edge facility, a structure that now sprawled across 3 asteroids and employed engineering principles that would have been considered impossible just months before. The sight before him was both chaotic and beautiful alien ships, of every conceivable design undergoing the human treatment, each one emerging stronger and more capable than its creators had ever imagined. His team had grown from 12 to 1,200, each engineer bringing their own brand of controlled chaos to the galaxy's problems. They came from every corner of human space, former military mechanics who'd kept fighter squadrons flying with spare parts and determination, civilian engineers who'd built space stations from salvaged components, and brilliant misfits who'd never quite fit into traditional engineering programs. The Galactic Council is requesting a meeting, his assistant Mike reported, approaching with a datapad that listed 17 different formal requests for audience. They want to discuss licensing human repair technology. The Krillian Empire alone is offering to trade 3 star systems for exclusive access to our methods. Jake laughed, the sound echoing through the massive hangar where a team of humans was somehow making a Vorthon quantum computer work better by hitting it with a rubber mallet. Tell them we're busy. We've got ships to fix and impossibilities to make routine. Think about it. When was the last time you saw someone turn down that kind of power and influence? Most people would have jumped at the chance to control galactic politics, to dictate terms to ancient civilizations. But Jake understood something that the politicians didn't. Real power comes from being indispensable, not from controlling access to what makes you indispensable. The facility buzzed with activity that seemed to defy organization, yet somehow achieved perfect efficiency. In Bay 7, a team was rebuilding a Nexary frigate using components from 4 different species, creating something that looked like it shouldn't work, but somehow performed better than any single species design. In Bay 12, engineers were teaching Aquarian technicians how to make their bioships more resilient using human metallurgy techniques. Vexthera approached, her massive form now a familiar sight in the human station. Over the past months, she'd become something of an unofficial ambassador, helping to bridge the gap between human methods and alien understanding. Her presence here wasn't just about maintaining her ship, was about learning from the species. That had saved her people. My people want to understand how you do this, she said, her voice carrying something that would have been impossible to imagine when she first arrived. The Krillian Academy of Engineering is offering too. Establish a permanent exchange program. They want to learn your techniques. Jake paused in his inspection of a damaged Celestial Empire battleship, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably absorbed more alien technology than most species had ever seen. It's simple, he replied, watching his team swarm over a damaged Andromedon cruiser like antibodies attacking an infection. Everyone else in the galaxy builds things that work perfectly until they don't. We build things that work especially well when they're broken. He gestured toward the bustling repair bays where human engineers worked alongside alien crews, sharing knowledge and creating impossibilities that would have been considered fantasy just months before. The universe is messy, violent, and unpredictable. But you know what? So are we. And that's exactly why we're perfect for each other. The scene around them was proof of that philosophy in action. Human engineers were teaching Zephyrian technicians how to make their energy weapons more efficient by accepting that they would sometimes fail and planning for it. Andromedan scientists were learning how human redundancy systems could make their perfect biocomputers more resilient to damage. Everywhere you looked, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were discovering that sometimes the best solution to complexity was elegant simplicity. But here's what really made the difference. Humans weren't just fixing ships. They were fixing the fundamental approach to problem solving that had limited galactic civilization for millennia. They were teaching entire species that perfection wasn't about never failing. It was about failing better, as the Crimson Vengeance prepared for departure. Its hull gleaming with the hybrid technology that had become humanity's calling card, Vexera turned to Jake one final time. The ship that had arrived as a dying relic was now leaving as something unprecedented, a vessel that combined the best of two civilizations into something greater than either could achieve alone. "You've given us something we never had before," she said quietly, her four eyes reflecting the lights of the busy repair station. "What's that?" "Hope." Jake smiled, already turning toward the next impossible repair, where a team was attempting to resurrect a ship that had been declared dead for 3 centuries. "Lady, that's what we do best." Across the galaxy, human repair stations continued their work, turning the broken dreams of 1,000 species into something stronger than they'd ever imagined possible. They weren't just fixing ships, they were fixing the future itself. One impossible repair at a time. The age of perfect machines had ended, as the age of resilient ones had begun. The end want to see how small, consistent improvements create massive transformations over time? Check out our next video on the power of compounding. Discover how these same principles can revolutionize every area of your life, starting today.